Beynimizde ne kadar hücre var? Bilim adamlarının saydığına göre 10 milyar. Beyindeki bu 10 milyar hücre harekete geçmek için tedebbür, tefekkür adına böyle bir tembih bekliyor. Allah onları oraya koyduğuna göre, o kadar asker orada bulunduğuna göre, bence onunla çok şey fethedebilirsiniz. Ama zannediyorum onlar da uykuda. Evet, uykuda.
The people with the money control everything. They control the judges, they control the politics, they control the government. Every place I've been, I've discovered the same pattern, that the money controls everything.
Po meni je to negativno i po meni to nije nešto što treba podržavati, nešto što treba da školuje našu djecu. Dakle, znanje je samo po sebi svjetlo, prosvjetljenje i obrazovanje ne treba da ljude uči služenju, već treba da ljude uči dakle, da svjetlo uma koriste u punoj slobodi.
If you want to change a society, you use education. Whether in Nigeria, America, Turkey, wherever you go, you use education.
Hem o ülkenin çocuklarını yetiştiriyor ama ne için yetiştiriyor? Kendi mantalitesine ileride o ülkede söz sahibi olması için yapıyor.
Something is fishy going on here. And I've been seeing it for years. Years. It's not just something that happened. Wake up, people. You see what's going on? Something's happening here.
When you try talking to people about it, they think you're crazy.
They do have the support of many influential people in this country, top politicians of either party. They are very well protected.
Why are they so secretive? Well, I'd be secretive too if I was stealing hundreds of millions of dollars.
How do you get $50 billion? Come on. You're not getting it from, you're not getting contributions at the mosque.
$1 billion US. Can you imagine? A radical Islamic movement is running the largest charter schools in America.
I guess it's how they're allowed to get away with it. Like, who are they connected to here?
Why are we allowing this? What is going on? What is the thought process? I don't have a good answer to that right now.
we have problems coming. It could be a year from now, 2 years from now. Nobody knows. But when the time is right, they will act.
I've covered many stories in my career, and often a story that appears simple at first glance becomes ever more complex the more you look into it. And so it was with the one I'm about to tell you. I was asked to look into an organization known as Hizmet, the Gulen movement. To their supporters, they're the face of moderate Islam, dedicated to building bridges between faiths and promoting science-based education. But their detractors accuse them of building a multi-billion-dollar network of fraudulent schools and businesses, of buying political influence through corruption, and even of being a terrorist organization.
Attention passengers, we've now reached our destination.
I started an investigation that was in equal measure an experience of clarity and confusion, following a trail that became more and more complicated as it moved along.
Is it often like this?
Huh?
At this time of year, is this sort of...
No. It's supposed to be nice tomorrow. It might lay up around, later on.
Yeah.
My first stop was the Pocono Hills in Pennsylvania, Saylorsburg, population 1,126. A sleepy town with one claim to fame. It's where the controversial Imam Fethullah Gulen calls home since leaving Turkey in 1999. I met a local man who's lived in Saylorsburg his whole life, and he says the arrival of Fethullah Gulen and his followers changed their town forever.
People live in fear. Sometimes, like the mafia is a mystery man. If you ask, they don't really know. Half these people don't know what the hell's going on in there because you're not allowed to go in there. But we're going by people's property. We can see everybody else's property, but we can't see his property. Why? What's the big secret?
John Favre saw the new arrivals move into Saylorsburg. Since then, he's documented their comings and goings. He drove with me to the compound, but wouldn't get out of the car because he says he's afraid.
Yeah, so with the sign there, the gate there, this will be fine.
Okay. All right. You okay in the middle of the road?
Yep. I can move if so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so piece to camera, take one.
So the retreat or camp or whatever it's called by the people around here and beyond is extremely discreet. There's a small sign up that lets you know where it is, but otherwise driving past, blink and you'd miss it. It's really tucked away within a rural community, and unless you were looking for it, you wouldn't know it was here. On your part, I get the feeling that a lot of this is a mixture of instinct, that there's something not right.
No, I talk to a lot of people, and people feel this. Some people feel this. American people feel the same way. Yeah. But they don't have time to. I'm just telling you, people live their lives. They don't have time to worry about this guy in Saylorsburg because they don't really care. Nobody cares until it. You know what? You know when they care? When something happens.
To me, John personified a classic small-town reaction to the unknown, to strangers. But there are plenty of other religious retreats buried in the US countryside, including Saylorsburg, and their doors tend to be open. There's something a bit different about the Gulen compound, a sense of secrecy that causes concern in the local community here.
One morning I was having my coffee and I was reading, and I heard gunfire. I heard automatic weapons. I never heard a gun before in my life. And it was so loud and it was so close, and I ducked under my kitchen table And I called my husband. I said, I don't know what's going on. I saw the helicopter going in and out. So I'd sit at the end of my driveway and watch this helicopter, only at night, going in and out of the camp. And then the protest started.
Please stop. I'm asking you, and I'm asking you kindly. I would like you to please stop.
This town, which had long been a sleepy backwater, became a battleground overnight. The Pocono Hills now echoed with the sound of angry protests, helicopters coming and going, and some said automatic weapons. Salisbury had suddenly been put on the map.
We really didn't know what to do, to tell you the truth. He just seems to be very well protected, so you feel powerless.
People started calling the cops because they wanted to know what was going on in this camp. And we didn't get anywhere, and then people started calling the FBI. It was shortly after the calls were coming in that the camp decided to go underground with their shooting range. We talked to a guy that laid the cement in the underground shooting range, and he said that he had never in his life laid walls that thick in anywhere. So we know for a fact that they went underground, and then all the machine gun fire stopped after that.
I know that there's been some underground building there below the house. There are several rooms under there, and I believe, although I don't know, but I believe that they're safe rooms.
Safe rooms for the personal protection of the people on the retreat.
Exactly.
The people of Salisbury believe the arrival of Fethullah Gulen and his followers has divided a once close-knit community. They accuse local officials of being bought off with gifts and bribes, while they turn a blind eye to the activities at the compound.
And then we knew he was some kind of great religious leader from Turkey that moved over here and bought this piece of property, and he's going to have his followers come over here and use this as a, I guess, a retreat. Not the religious retreats that I went to. I know religious retreats, you don't have armed guards around, where you need security to go in. You know, it seems to be a little bit beyond a religious retreat. It seems like it's some kind of fortress, protecting something.
I've seen surveillance at universities, I've seen surveillance at military installations. I don't think there are many places that can match what he has up there.
There were no records of the construction. There were no plans submitted or approved to the Planning Commission. I did an exhaustive search of their construction work and found nothing that documented an underground structure, even though I have spoken to people who have worked on it. I can understand the discomfort of some people because it is so secluded.
It is clear that Fethullah Gulen and his organization enjoy powerful support in the United States. But who is this secretive imam from Turkey? Why is he here? And how has he managed to create a multi-billion-dollar business empire? In Salisbury, some locals are convinced they may have a religious cult in their backyard. But is this just a local issue? Or is this something that goes way beyond Pennsylvania?
Good evening. By being here tonight, you are contributing to lasting peace and security at home and abroad. You're contributing to the promotion of the ideals of tolerance and interfaith dialogue, inspired by Fethullah Gulen and his transnational social movement. You do it through your everyday lives, and you are truly strengthening the fabric of our common humanity, as well as promoting the ongoing cultural and educational ties that bind our world together.
Let's unveil this mystery man who lives in Salisbury.
I grew up in a place where it was a pretty bad neighborhood that had gangs and a lot of bad things going on. My mom decided that she didn't want me to go to the school that I was zoned to. So I would have to wake up at about 5 o'clock, catch actually 3 buses. So it took me about an hour and a half to get here.
A calculated risk for a then 12-year-old boy.
But I think the school was worth it.
The school is Harmony Science Academy, 3 buses and a world away from Brandon Okafor's life in the Alief area of West Houston.
Nelson Mandela once said that education is the most powerful weapon you can use with which to change the world. But what happens if the weapon of education is used in the wrong way? I'm now leaving the Poconos behind and traveling to East Coast America, Massachusetts, where I've been told parents and educators are gathering to try to stop a new Gulen school opening in the area. This is the small town of West Springfield, a typical American community. So why would an imam from Turkey want to open a school here? For more than a decade, filmmaker Mark Hall has been investigating Fethullah Gulen's activities in the American education business. And tonight he's screening his documentary on the activities and practices of these schools.
Privately managed schools that are funded with taxpayer dollars. It's a perfect storm that's destroying American public education.
This is about money, this is about politics, and it's harmful to our democracy.
I would say about 300 kids are supposed to use this playground.
There seemed to be some treatment differently of minority students, minority teachers, and females.
It's not a good environment for anybody.
I've never known a school to be rated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This is a first.
The operation of charter schools is very much like a private business here. There's very little regulation. There's less regulation than our normal state-run schools. And there's a big loophole in terms of what a dishonest person or a group of dishonest people might do with the money that they're given.
If you were going to influence a nation, where would you start? The young, charter schools. And then you apply for government funding from the US government and you get $800 million to run your network of 145 charter schools, the largest charter school network in the US. So I think this whole thing does not, with Gulen, doesn't pass the smell test.
This guy is not educated. He has what would be equivalent here in the United States to less than a third grade education. Can't speak a word of English.
What I've had in my field of vision the entire time these last few years is the obvious infiltration of the American educational system with their charter schools in all these states, bringing over thousands of supposed teachers to fill the ranks at these schools and engaging in just a number of what I would consider highly suspect, if not fraudulent type activities. It feels very mafia-like or organized crime-like.
There's very little oversight, truly, as far as eyes on what's going on there. They have to submit an annual report, and the state will come in once a year or maybe a little more often and do a walkthrough. But they're really not watched the way public schools are. They just aren't.
But it's not just about education. These schools are generating what some say are huge profits for the network, money that comes from the United States taxpayer. One of the most controversial activities of Fethullah Gülen's schools in America is a small piece of paper called the tuzuk. This is a contract that Turkish teachers in the schools have to sign, handing back almost half their salary in a cash payment to the network.
What I really found out about the Gulen movement is that they were taking my husband's money. So I asked him after we got married, I said, you're not contributing enough to the household. And he goes, well, you don't know, I don't have that much money. And I said, yes, I know how much money you make. I know because you came over on an H-1B visa. And he said, yeah, that's what it says I make, but I don't actually make that. There is an agreement with the school where I have to give back 40% of my salary in cash.
They're required through the Gülen organization, it's called a tuzuk, to kick back some percentage up to about 40% of their pay, and they directly kick that back in cash.
They're offered a job at $50,000, but really they're making $28,000, and that other $22,000 gets kicked back to the school director or the school principal, and that gets funneled back to the Gülen organization.
They're receiving in excess of $729 million each year in tax dollars. So it's a large sum of money that is often given back to the political class here in the United States, and that influences their opinion.
But I was just blown away by the concept of that. Just think of the thousands of kids that came through the system, thousands of kids graduating each year. The network that he has in academia is phenomenal.
My ultimate conclusion is that they're basically financing a criminal scheme, and they're using the schools very cleverly to do so. And the schools are funded by American taxpayers, so they have figured out a way to tap into American taxpayer funds to fund their larger political organization.
The more I spoke to people, the more I realized this wasn't just a local issue. From Texas to Massachusetts, you can find links in the education network to the Gülen organization. This has become a nationwide issue, and more people wanted to talk about it. On to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where a local journalist has contacted me. She's been campaigning against a Gülen-linked school in her community for years.
I am 56 years old and I've lived on the same street for 54 years. I'm just somebody who cares a great deal about my neighborhood. I mean, it's run like a prestigious private school from the outside. The children are in uniforms. The parents are told that it's going to be a rigorous education, that if they go through to 12th grade and graduate, that they are guaranteeing them a place in college. They don't tell the parents that the college that they're being guaranteed a spot in is a Gülen college.
In Philadelphia, we went to see a new Gülen-linked charter school site slated for development. Moments after we arrived, it appeared that our presence hadn't gone unnoticed.
What's happening, Andrew?
It's backing up. I was parking.
It's coming back.
It was time to experience some of that strange sense of the clandestine mixed with the real.
Hi. Just take it. This is the building that's been sold for the new charter school, isn't it? Yeah, that's what we're just getting some pictures of. We're just doing a documentary about charter schools, so we thought we'd take a look. Are you part of the new school?
Not now, maybe.
Are you going to be soon? I mean, do you know when it starts? When it opens up?
August.
August.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
The funny thing is, it's that approach and then say nothing and then go away. Opponents of Gulen-linked schools in Philadelphia accuse them of targeting children in low-income areas and taking money from the government while delivering substandard education.
It breaks my heart. Yesterday something happened that made me reflect. I spoke to a woman I wasn't expecting, that is a mother of a son who goes to the school, who wants the best for her son. That's all she's ever wanted. She wants him to get an education. She wants him to be able to go to college. She wants him to get the hell out of here. And she believes that these men are going to do that for her son. And when I questioned them, she was very defensive. And then when I said, I don't need to question your parenting. I understand that you want the best. I do. I said, but if I were to show you this and you talk to other parents and you saw the lawsuits involved, would that change your mind? She goes, it would break my heart. It is a pack of lies, and these parents deserve better, and these children certainly deserve better.
The charter schools debate is the clearest example of the Gulen movement's reliance on education as an income stream. But what I hadn't realized is quite how far the network stretches around the globe. It seems the US operation is just the tip of an iceberg that includes an estimated 1,000 schools worldwide in 140 countries. They often go unnoticed and appear unconnected, but are all linked to the one organization. A former high-ranking Gulenist told me the movement's international expansion is both deliberate and, he says, dangerous.
Dünyanın her tarafında okullar vardır. Ben de gittiğim ülkeler vardı. İlk gittiğim yerde tek Türk olarak ben vardım. İlk önce o gittiğim yerle alakalı raporlar hazırladım. Buralarla alakalı ne tür ticari işler yapılabilir, halkının sosyolojik yapısı, nüfuz edilebilecek kesimler ve burada bir okul mu açılacak, kurs mu açılacak, bununla alakalı bir plan hazırlayıp bulunduğum ülkenin bağlı olduğu merkeze durumu arz ederek orada artık açılması gereken organizasyonu belirliyorduk.
Everyone in Turkish society knows that education is the key to a better life standard and a better future. So they identified young Turkish people with lots of intellectual ability. They put them into their evening and weekend cram schools. And then even, of course, what we've learned over the past 10 years is that because of their networks in the state, in state institutions, they also had gained access to the answers to the questions and previous to the actual exams being given. So they were able to provide answers to their students for the exams that they would be taking for high school and university entrance exams.
Diyorlar ki bu Amerika'daki bu örgütün başı Fethullah Gülen için bir dosyada geçiyor bu durum. Hoca efendi diyorlar bu sınavlarda sorulacak soruları rüyasında görmüş. Muhtemelen şu sorular sorulabilir diye dün akşam gördüğü rüyayı bize anlattı diyorlar. Yine bunların adamları da sınava girecek çocuklara diyorlar ki işte bu işe kutsiyet atfederek, işte ayrı bir yöne sürükleyerek, hoca efendi dün akşam bu soruları görmüş, muhtemelen bu sorular çıkabilir, buna çalışalım, sınava öyle girelim diyorlar. Ertesi gün çocuklar sınava girdiğinde de bakıyorlar ki hakikaten sözde hoca efendinin rüyasında gördüğü sorular. Bir taşta, tabiri caizse bizde bir söz var, işte bir taşta iki kuş vurmuş oluyorlar. Birincisi taraftarlarına sınav sorularını önceden veriyorlar. Bunu yaparken de hoca efendi dedikleri örgütün liderine de
yetiştirdiğiniz çocuklar vasıtasıyla o ülkelerde söz sahibi olabilmek. o ülkeyi kontrol altına alabilmek.
I want to find out how and why this network has spread around the globe and what influence it wields worldwide. My first stop is the Balkans. Here there are dozens of schools, universities and educational institutions linked to Fethullah Gulen. But one country, Serbia, has taken a stand against them. I want to find out why.
To je bio jedan sistem koji je iznenada se pojavio. Mislim da je iskorišten prostor praznine u ponudi, obrazovanju, prije svega muslimana na zapadu. Mislim da je sistem nastao sa tom namjerom i njegov fokus je bio prostor nekako od Kazahstana, Kavkaza, Balkana, Zapadna Europa i Sjeverna Amerika.
I've come to visit Serbia's last Gulen-linked school. My guide is Nemanja Starovic. So tell us what happened with this school.
Well, there is no much official information about what happened. It was just the information was spread in the beginning of May that this basic school was shut down for not obeying fire safety regulations, but that, of course, came after the strong, will of the Turkey, not just towards Serbia, but towards all the countries in the region to reconsider the operations of the school that are, to some extent, connected to the Gulen movement.
Serbia is one example of a country where the Gulen education system met pressure from authorities. But this country is the exception rather than the rule. In fact, in nearly 150 countries around the world, this network has expanded without resistance. As far back as the 1990s, Gulen schools were setting up in Africa, particularly the Saharan states. Nigeria is one of the big ones. It's got enormous oil wealth and grinding poverty. But this is still Africa's richest economy, a country that is open for business to all. The Gulen-linked schools here do good business with students from elite families. We went to the capital, Abuja, home to many of Africa's most powerful politicians and wealthiest entrepreneurs. The schools here are well known, but as we saw in Europe and America, we found extraordinary levels of secrecy surrounding them and a consistent reluctance for people to speak to us on camera, or at all. In Abuja, however, some people did come forward, but asked us to hide their identities.
Playing with, other people's future in your favor, that's really disgusting. You claim to be sincere, but when it comes to your practice, you say something different and you act also differently. Why? Because of lack of sincerity.
Most politicians we have in Nigeria today have their kids in the school. Or let me say almost, ranging from ministers, governors, even the former president had to sponsor some less privileged kids in the school. I think that was 6 years ago, and they all graduated from the school.
Any organization wanting to establish itself abroad has to make allowances and contingencies for the priorities, for the headline considerations of the host nation. In the case of Nigeria, that is religion. Islam and Christianity
in pretty much equal measure.
Started with every citizen must come through the system before becoming somebody else, be it president, whatever. You have to be what? Once you pass through the institutions, that means you are their property. You are their puppet.
As we travelled further, a common theme began to emerge. Again and again, we were told that the Gülen movement is an organisation with two faces. A smiling, moderate face that promotes education, and behind it, another face, a very different face to the one the world sees.
Allah onların evlerine ateşler salsın, yuvalarını yıksın, birliklerini bozsun, duygularını sinelerinde bıraksın.
What they would do is they would give scholarships to smart children of poor families and create a sense of being indebted. These kids, who would otherwise become shepherds or bus drivers, would become governors, admirals, judges, members of parliament, even ministers, would feel that they came to those positions not because they deserved it or they worked hard for it, but because their spiritual leader, Mr. Gülen, made them.
The minute you start to talk about the scope of what they're doing, even just within the United States, you don't even have to mention that they're doing this in other countries. It becomes a little much for people to wrap their heads around. It seems as though you're wandering into fiction. It can't possibly be true.
People would try to drink the leftover water from his glass because they thought it would be holy. It would heal them. People would try to grab the napkin that he would use, the used napkin, and keep it as a souvenir, thinking that that would help them with their problems. This had become a sickness, a psychological disorder after a period of time.
This guy knows how to milk the system like nobody else. He has been like in this one depressed area here in northeastern Pennsylvania. He sets up like Turkish cultural societies, Turkish arts festivals. And you see, people who are just so enamored and they're so enraptured with this concept of diversity. They have to be diverse, they gotta be multicultural, support the, and Gülen knows that. He's been making millions and millions and millions just off these groups that he sets up almost overnight.
These are just the nice people who took me on a trip to Turkey. These are the nice people who cut a ribbon with me at a cultural center and we saw some kids doing a traditional Turkish dance. That doesn't make sense.
While making this film, we contacted more than 100 people all over the world, many of whom had strong opinions about this organization. Again and again, people were happy to talk privately, but refused to be interviewed. More than 10 people in different countries in Africa, Europe and the US told us they had received threats from, they believe, representatives of the Gülen organization. We also tried on various occasions to secure face-to-face interviews with members of the movement.
Hello, is that Osman?
Yes, speaking. Who's this?
Hi, Osman. My name's Andrew Wilson. I got your number from the guys at the gate at Chestnut Grove here in Sailorsburg.
Yes, sir.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks very much. Listen.
But nothing ever came of it.
Why do you think the Gülen movement has so little to say for itself?
Well, I think it's a basic human psychology. Sometimes when you are strong and when you do feel strong, you don't have a need to answer to some allegations, and answering to them seems like a sign of a weakness.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there were so many occasions where we wanted to talk to people within the Gülen movement, high-level people. They had no interest in talking to us because we would have asked them very difficult questions about what we had heard. They weren't welcoming to that kind of approach.
bulunduğunuz arkadaşlarınız, çalışılan kurumlar farklı oluyor. Çoğu zaman kendi içerimizde de bize ablalarımızın veya büyük bölge sorumluların söylediği kendinizle ait, ailenizle ilgili herhangi şeyleri, özelliklerinizi çok fazla birbirinize açmayın. Örgütün kendi içerisinde de gizlilik vardı birbirimize karşı. Ki bu dışarıya karşı had safhadaydı.
The secrecy we discovered around the Gulen organization seems to be at odds with their stated goal of tolerance and interfaith dialogue. But it soon became apparent there were plenty of influential people in the US and around the world who have embraced the Imam's message.
Somebody told me about Gulen. This guy, just a harmless old guy. They were like, yeah? Try to look at some of the links where he loses his mind. I'm like, what do you mean loses his mind? He goes, he puts out weekly messages to all of his followers. He goes, some of the followers leaked the secret messages that he puts out. I found on YouTube one of Gulen's messages where he loses his mind, but he's screaming at the top of his lungs, his throat, his heart. I mean, the guy looked like a maniac.
We found their influence in education, in the social fabric of places all over the world, in politics, even in academia.
People know about it, but they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to be called Islamophobic. They don't want to be called xenophobic.
Some of the things that the Gulen himself is talking feels like a music to some ears in the Western society. They even call him the Calvin of the Islam, someone who is willing to reform the Islam to make it moderate, who is promoting interfaith dialogue and so on and so on.
In the United States at this point, our leadership, our politicians, our government is really seeking out that moderate form of Islam that we can somehow identify with in the post 9/11 years. I mean, we were violently attacked in this country by a group of people that seemed to identify with this religion. And so when people come to us and say, you know, we really don't believe in this kind of hardline fanaticism, you know, we're science-based, we believe in the same things you do. And the Gulen movement is very good at this. I mean, they're dressed in Western clothing. They're highly educated in most instances. And at least on first blush, these people seem to be the kinds of folks that we would love to have in our country.
By now, we had established a kind of modus operandi for the Gulen movement. In country after country, we heard about the secrecy, the money, the aggressive expansion, the infiltration of political elites, and providing education to future leaders around the world. But to what end? On the night of July 15th, 2016, some of these threads came together.
I think if you want to go to the sinister motive and put all the pieces together, I think the suggestion is, and I think there is some circumstantial evidence to support this, is that these funds being milked away from the American education system are ultimately flowing offshore to fund basically the insurrection that's happening back in Turkey. Did those nickels and dimes or whatever add up and buy bullets that were fired into the presidential palace in Ankara? Now, nobody wants to hear that. Everybody thinks that's some sort of a bizarre Jason Bourne plotline, but that is the fear.
İlerilere gitme, böyle can damarları içinde dolaşma. Ve sonra eğer gönlünüz gelmeyecekse yara alınmadan, hissedilmeden dönüp geriye gelme meselesi. Geleceğimiz adına çok önemli esaslardır. Türkiye'deki devlet yapısı ölçüsüne göre bütün anayasal müesseselerdeki güç ve kuvveti cephenize çekeceğiniz ana kadar Her adım erken sayılır.
I'm looking into an organization called Hizmet, also known as the Gulen Network. To their supporters, they're the face of moderate Islam, dedicated to building bridges between faiths and promoting science-based education. But their opponents accuse them of building a multi-billion-dollar network of fraudulent schools and businesses, of buying political influence through corruption, and even of being responsible for a bloody coup attempt in Turkey. In our investigation so far, we've discovered a network that operates in more than 100 countries worldwide. But in each place, it seems the modus operandi remains the same. There is an unusually high level of secrecy. They're in the business of opening schools that often attract the elites of society and also offer scholarships to gifted poorer children. And in many countries, they enjoy influential support, which makes life very difficult for those who speak out against them. Naturally, the idea of a group of religious educators plotting to take over a government seems far-fetched. But in Turkey, it's a matter of public record. This country of 80 million people is a melting pot of faiths and ethnicities that divide or bridge East and West. But currently, the majority of Turks now seem to agree on one thing. They say Fethullah Gülen's network is a threat to the country's democracy. They say his followers spent decades infiltrating the police, the armed forces, and the justice system in the country. And now they say his network was behind a July event in 2016 that almost toppled the government.
Well, in one of his interviews, he said they're claiming that I want to control Turkey. What is Turkey? Turkey is too small for me. I have schools and students everywhere. Ours is a global mission. So the guy wanted to be the ruler of the world, I guess.
Falan diyerekten hazırlanıyordu ama bu kesin bir darbe yapılacağı söylenmemişti bize. Veya böyle bir askeri bir müdahalenin yapılacağı söylenmedi ama hani ileride büyük bir Türkiye'de bir şey yaşanırsa, bir kaos olursa bu cemaatin üzerine atılacak. Kesinlikle siz müstehir olun. Cemaatin bu yaşananlarla herhangi bir ilgisi, bağlantısı.
They thought they could take over. They thought that Turkey in 2016 was the same as Turkey in 1960 when a group of 40 officers did take over. But Turkey today is much, much more complicated, sophisticated country than that.
In Istanbul, a group of soldiers rolled tanks onto the main bridge linking Asia with Europe. They occupied television stations and took over the city's main airport.
The TVs were putting flash news saying that the gendarmerie forces had closed the first bridge with one side, which kind of was awkward to me at least, because gendarmerie has no jurisdiction in Istanbul. And then I said, I don't know, maybe something is going on. There's some kind of an exercise. And then I started getting phone calls from Ankara, which is where I was headed to, saying that there were some F-16s flying by very low in the city or within the outskirts of the city, which was also weird because why would they fly, you know, that close at that hour of night?
Emniyet binasını vurun. Emniyet binasını tahrip edin. Anlaşıldı. Çatışma olan bölgeye atış yapıyoruz. Mutabık mıyız? Tamamıyla mutabık. Emniyet binasına atış yapın. Emniyet binası.
The coup plotters planned to take over Turkey's two main cities, Istanbul and Ankara, with the help of friendly elements within the military. But they needed to win the support of the head of the army, Hulusi Akar.
They then told him they expected him to go on television and to announce a coup d'etat. In other words, it appears that they expected Hulusi Akar to lead the coup, although they had no evidence to support that idea at all. Well, he absolutely refused, so what were they going to do?
How much pressure was being put on General Akar?
According to his statement, they tied his belt round his neck and he was actually hurt by this and tied him up, gagged and bound. They couldn't really do anything else. They couldn't kill him, clearly not. So they were in a bind.
Did they suggest that he communicate?
Yes, there was one point actually at which one of the plotters suggested to him that he should telephone Gülen in the United States to confirm that they were in favor of the coup.
Our own warplanes bombed our own parliament 11 times that night. Those were not the warplanes of enemy countries. Those were the planes bought by the people of Turkey with their taxpayers, with their savings, and those planes bombed the people who paid for them.
Adel Oksuz is the man Turkish authorities say organized the coup attempt. CCTV footage shows him making multiple trips between Turkey and the United States in the run-up to July 15th. It is he who is accused of carrying out the orders of his friend Fethullah Gülen.
Adel Oksuz, who was Gülen's right-hand man, was in the United States 2 days before the coup. He flew literally dozens of times back and forth to communicate with Gülen. His videotape coming into the airport in Istanbul, and then was photographed 2 days later giving orders at the Ikinci Air Base in Ankara, where the coup plotters' headquarters were and where the chief of staff of the Turkish military and other top-ranking generals were held as hostages. So, that's more evidence against Gülen than existed against Osama bin Laden in relation to the 9/11 operations, which the US used, of course, to justify the invasion of Afghanistan once the Taliban refused to turn Mr. bin Laden over. So this is a situation now that we have with Fethullah Gülen.
It was prepared through outside money and outside powers. It had a very strong domestic element. There was a very strong element of the army in the loop of the coup. It had been prepared for some time. It was a major coup. And the reactions to the coup had also been pre-prepared.
I mean, this was a poor planning. It was beyond their scope, beyond their capacity. As a military people, I can count 20 mistakes made by FETÖ coup d'etat operation.
So this was basically their last chance to do something. Otherwise, they would lose all power effectively. And so they decided on the disastrous option of overthrowing the Turkish government by launching a coup before their top leaders were purged.
Recently, new information has come to light regarding the extent of the coup plotting, how it was funded, and that link back to Saylorsburg, Pennsylvania. As we spoke to more people, one name that kept coming up was a Palestinian called Mohammed Dahlan.
What we know about the connections between Dahlan and Gülen, a full story is still to be revealed, but we know money passed hands, we know it was through a Palestinian intermediary in the States, and we know that messages passed as well. Now, my sources came from Turkish intelligence and also from inside the Emirati elite.
There is evidence that money went from the UAE via Mohammed Dahlan to support Gulen and the coup attempt. And certainly these countries, as a coup seemed to be succeeding or was underway, they were all very enthusiastic and celebrating until it fell apart.
The money came specifically from the Emiratis. Dahlan was the bag carrier and he was the message carrier. And it went straight to Turkey and to forces within Turkey.
There were planes and helicopter gunship shooting.
Former Turkish ambassador to Germany, Hüseyin Kaşioglu, finds it painful to relive that night. He went out to protest and found himself on the receiving end of a sniper's bullet.
But this cafe became your meeting point.
This cafe became our meeting point because it's the closest place to the way to the parliament, because we wanted to defend our parliament, the shrine, the holy place of democracy. For us, it was important to go to the parliament, to sit in front of the parliament, to hinder the tanks. They could smash us in a second, but if there would be many tanks, they would stop at one point. So we were determined to do that. This was the trouser I wore at that time. The bullet went in from here, through here, and went out somewhere here. It's sad, but that's what it is.
But it's something. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. That's all right. It's good that we're talking.
The night I was at the hospital was the terrific part. When I was shot, I didn't feel anything. Other people saw me. I felt dry in my mouth all of a sudden, and I was wondering why. Because I was not in fear, I was not in any bad condition. I was proud to be there with other people shouting, so another young lady being shot, another man next to me, because they were shooting indiscriminately from a vehicle in front of the general staff. So how come that my mouth is dry? So then I sat on the ground, and some other people took me all of a sudden from my arms and said, because I was bleeding. I didn't realize I was bleeding from the bullet hole which went out. But the democracy was a bigger issue of our future, of our generations, of our kids, our grandchildren. So, and if they should prevail, this dictator or this military people, I mean, what would expect us in the coming 20, 30, 40 years? What kind of country would be a marionette of other powers?
How do you plan, in secret, to topple a government and take over a society? There was nothing spontaneous about the events of July 15th. It now seems clear that this coup attempt was global. It was well funded, and a good number of people knew it was coming. Indeed, in the months preceding the coup, a number of opinion pieces started appearing in American newspapers, criticizing Turkey's government and even appearing to encourage would-be coup plotters.
Editorials started appearing by Michael Rubin of the American Enterprise Institute, John Hanna, who was an high-ranking aide to Dick Cheney, who works now for the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, started speculating and advocating, actually, a coup against the Turkish government. But there's strong indications that the Gulenists were encouraged by others, weren't just operating on their own, but did have support.
What would have happened if the coup had succeeded? The American reaction would have been a deathly silence. And for about 3 hours, John Kerry, to his inordinate and lasting shame, started talking about, the importance of stability and continuity.
I hope there will be stability and peace and continuity within Turkey.
He didn't mention the dreaded democracy word once. This is exactly what happened in Egypt. The same characters were involved, the same sort of money was involved, the same sort of planning was involved. In Egypt succeeded, in Turkey it didn't.
I think a lot of the national media is so antagonistic toward Erdogan and the sort of the political machine that is Turkey right now that they just don't want to listen to it. They don't want to hear it.
There's a lot of fake news about Turkey, there's a lot of fake news about the country, there's a lot of fake news about the government. We live in a very superficial news cycle here where the BBC, I would argue, the BBC gives a very one-sided, a very distorted and a very highly opinionated understanding, not just of Turkey, but the whole of the Middle East.
And I've said too, I said, look, hundreds of people were killed. This is a real thing. This is a democratically elected government. There was an attempted overthrow. I've seen the bullet holes. I was in Turkey 3 or 4 days before the coup, walking the same streets where then on the international news feed I saw tanks and other things, and they don't want to hear it. Erdogan locks up journalists. Why do we care about anything other than going after that story? All right, fine. Are they really journalists? That's not, he's suppressing speech. Maybe, I don't know. You're not very educated about Turkey, so why are you,
It's a lack of understanding of Turkish politics, quite frankly. If I might say so, I don't hold the media entirely innocent in this respect. I think one of the problems, if I may speak frankly, is that far too many journalists go in who don't speak the language, who don't know about the history and the culture, go there for a week and talk to people. And the people they talk to are basically English-speaking urban elite. And a high proportion of these are likely to be highly critical of Erdogan, which they're perfectly entitled to be, but they don't necessarily represent public opinion. If you don't speak Turkish, if you don't go out into the country, if you don't interview people in small towns and villages, then there's a country of almost 80 million people, you're not going to be able to give a fair picture of what's going on. You wouldn't consider going to France without speaking a word of French, spend a week there in Paris, and then come back with pontifical statements about French politics, would you? But people do that in Turkey, I'm afraid to say.
Turks accuse Fethullah Gulen's network of building a parallel state. They say his followers infiltrated the military, the police and the justice system in Turkey and other countries over many years. And that they had support from people in high places around the world, politicians, educators and policymakers, from the US to Europe and Africa. But to what end?
What he tried in July 15th of 2016 in Turkey, taking over the government. He would come back to Turkey like Khomeini went back to Iran. That was his biggest dream. And he would be the spiritual leader. And then he would try to organize similar coups in different countries where his followers would end up gaining the control, and he would be the global leader of this kingdom that he wanted to achieve.
You look at the Gulen movement with their PACs. They're the #1 political action committees in the United States. Our lobby wants to help you. We're going to give you money.
The Clinton campaign has received over millions of dollars, anywhere from some estimates of $1 million to $3 million of campaign contributions from the Gulen movement. Do your due diligence. All you have to do is just do homework. This cult movement has taken over the world by using a pen, paper, and influence.
You know, it is this confluence of different things that gives a criminal group with political aspirations a place to reside, make money, be criminal about it, and get away with it. And nobody wants to do anything about it.
As the dust settled after the bloodiest night in Turkey's modern history, the government found itself with an even bigger problem. The so-called parallel state and its true intentions had revealed itself. Turkey's institutions were in chaos. Could Ankara forgive and forget, or punish the plotters?
We have to realize that the vast majority of Turkish society sees him as the culprit for what has been occurring in Turkish society in the past 10 years.
There was a lot of criticism towards the Turkish government at the time of the coup, the attempted coup, and immediately afterwards. What I think a lot of British citizens need to understand is the huge number of loss of life in trying to undermine and, at the point of a gun, get rid of a democratically elected government.
During this investigation, we contacted members of the Gülen network to ask them to give an account of their organization. All of them declined. But we managed to track down 2 former senior Gülenists turned whistleblowers who agreed to talk to us. What they told us lifted the lid on how and why the secretive network operates.
Ben örgüte 17 yaşında girdim. Lise son sınıfta. Bulunduğum okuldaki sınıf arkadaşlarımın yardımıyla, yani onların tavsiyesiyle.
Şimdi örgüt içerisindeki yapılanmaya göre herkesin bir abisi var. Bu en alttan en üste kadar herkesin geçerli. Bir saygı ve düzen içerisinde olur. Abinin verdiği talimatlar koşulsuz olarak yerine getirilir. Yani bir bölge, bir ev abisi varsa onun üzerinde bölge abisi, o bölgenin üstünde büyük bölge abisi, onun üzerinde il abisi, onun üzerinde büyük yani birkaç ilin toplandığı büyük bölgeler vardır ve onun üzerinde de işte Türkiye abisi.
After the 2016 coup attempt, Turkey's government declared Fethullah Gülen's network a terror organization. Here the group is known as FETÖ. Turkey has vowed to expel so-called FETÖ members from public institutions.
FETÖ terör örgütü geçmişi 40 yılın üzerinde bir zamana yayılan ve Türk tarihinde karşılaşılan en ciddi terör örgütü. Dünyada benzerleri çok az. Yıllar itibariyle insanlarımızın inançlarını, temiz duygularını sömürerek bu kadar gelişebilmiş gizli bir örgüt.
Öncesinden bildiğiniz için altyapıyı, çoğu cemaatte bir düstur vardır. İtaat et, kurtul, sorgulama. Sorgulama çok fazla yoktur örgüt içerisinde. Ve çok fazla sorgulayanı da sevmezler, hoş bakmazlar. Çok fazla sorgulamazlar. Eğer bir şey bize söyleniyorsa bir bildikleri vardır.
Olmuyor. Yani sizi her alanda, çünkü işinize olsun, eşinize kadar her yere sirayet ediyorlar. Evleneceğiniz kişiye kadar belirledikleri için öyle ben bırakıyorum, bıraktım, gittim diyemiyorsunuz. Bir taraftan bırakmaya kalktığınızda size ya eşiniz tarafından ya aileniz tarafından ya da işiniz tarafından tehdite maruz kalıyorsunuz.
İşte hani dediğim gibi bir faunusun içinde olduğumuz için bizden uzaklaşacaklar. İşte bizle artık irtibatı kesecekler. Bu büyük bir korkuydu benim için. Ve ben bunu göze alamıyordum açıkçası. 15 Temmuz darbe girişiminden sonra çok uzun zaman hayır, yapılamaz böyle bir şey. Olmaz zaten çok düşünüyorum. Ta ki işin içine girdiğimde hakikaten bazı şeylerin bu işte hani emniyet aşaması olsun, savcılık aşaması olsun, buralarda delilli, ispatlı şeyler görene kadar.
Turkey plays a strange role in modern geopolitics. Like so many Western countries, it too has had its days of empire, and like Western countries, resents the loss of influence in the modern world. But its role is in fact crucial, and the power politics driving that we underestimate at our peril.
In the last 100 years, the West has always disappointed Turkey. That's the sad part.
That's interesting. It's like the West feels that Turkey has always been a disappointment, but actually to the Turks, the West has been a disappointment.
Because Turks have tried their best. I mean, Turks tried, and actually, believe it or not, they're still trying, and never good enough. But also, what has happened in the last decade around the world just discouraged Turks that they will never accept us. You expect your friends and allies to just do something. Do something for a democratically elected government, whether you agree politically or not. When parliament gets bombed, you can tell that this is not just a regular coup d'etat. This is, again, no coup d'etat is permissible or forgivable, but bombing the parliament is, why would you bomb a parliament? Because the idea was to instigate a civil war and a massacre. Turkish people were alone in the streets with their bare hands versus the tanks, versus the F-16s, versus the helicopter gunships.
Turkey's wide-ranging crackdown on the Gulen network has flattened the organization at home. Ankara has tried to persuade other countries around the world to shut down Gulen-linked schools and businesses.
The movement is still there, but one thing you have to understand is that there's very little support for the movement anymore in Turkey, across the board, from left to right. The Turkish public is very aware of what the Gulenists were doing in the country, and there's very negative perceptions.
He is probably the most hated person in Turkey. No one has any sympathy for him in Turkey. The Western media and the Western leaders, however, see him as you mentioned, a man of religion, but he's a man of terror. He's responsible for many lives that were lost. He is responsible for putting an end to the dreams of millions of families in Turkey because he betrayed them.
The academics who study Fethullah Gulen's movement say this must have damaged their income stream from their global activities. But in some countries, the network continues its lobbying and public relations efforts.
The Gulen movement had hired a very well-known PR firm called Burstyn Marsteller, who in turn had hired Karen W. Hughes, the former press secretary to George W. Bush, the President of the United States. And she effectively went around as the figurehead for this particular lobbying situation, PR and marketing and manipulating the public, if you might call it, has been something that they've used very adroitly here in the United States. The Gulen movement has used that to advance their goals, political goals, financial goals, power goals.
In the United States, multiple demands for Fethullah Gulen to be extradited have been ignored, something that has caused considerable anger and frustration in the Turkish government.
The presence in the States itself had created this diplomatic crisis with Turkey, because you could imagine if a NATO ally had safeguarded a movement which attempted to overthrow democratically elected governments in London or in Washington, D.C., and the leader of that group was sitting there.
In January 2019, a delegation of American officials, including members of the FBI, traveled to Turkey to discuss the case against Gulen. But so far, no extradition proceedings have been started. It was time to return to America, where we'd managed to unearth some documents from Gulen's residency application in a Philadelphia courthouse. After he fled Turkey back in 1999, he was given US residency in 2002. The legal battle had been lengthy, clearly expensive, but in the end, the Turkish cleric managed to recruit some influential local support.
He did get awarded a visa.
He did.
Yeah.
He did, a special status. So the American government, you can say suspiciously is complicit in harboring him.
And the application, of course, was supported by Morton Abramowitz, who was the former ambassador to the U.S., as well as George Fides and Graham Fuller, who were analysts with the CIA. So there's been a lot of speculation in Turkey about this connection.
Anytime we try to apply to bring a relative over from Turkey to here, not alone, forget about a CIA agent signing my relative's immigration documents, I can't even get my local congressman to give him a letter of support. But how is it Graham Fuller, an ex-CIA agent, signs some documents of support for Fethullah Gulen? How is that possible?
The head of this organization is notoriously difficult to reach. Our attempts by email and phone got us nowhere. So in the end, we decided to simply go up to the front door.
Hi, how you doing? Sorry? Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
The private security there was armed and extremely jumpy at first. There was a clear closed doors policy, so instead I decided to reconnect with our local guide, John Favre.
Should we go down here and take a look?
Well, we could go a little bit, but we don't want to be on their property. You know,
Do we know where the property is?
I don't really have a line, but I would say it's very close to, like maybe right here. I wouldn't suggest going any further down. As you see people walking right there. Just keep in mind, you're being watched. The cameras are all over. No religious figure in the world, as far as I know, has armed guards to protect this imam that didn't even graduate from high school. How can a person so powerful and have small education is unbelievable. They believe he's the God. My God is up there, but their God is there. They will do anything for him. If things go bad, they will protect him. He is the God.
Right now, the Gulen network in the United States looks to still be operating with considerable support and without much fear of its opponents. In Europe, hundreds of Gulen schools and businesses are still operational, with Germany the most significant. The German authorities have resisted Turkish demands to hand over suspects who fled there after the coup. In Africa and elsewhere, the network's capacity to make money seems undiminished.
Terrorism comes in very different formats. The images that we know of bombs and machine guns, that type of movement is over with terrorists. Today, terrorism is being implemented by a stroke of a pen on a piece of paper and with influence.
I think there's some people who think that it's too big to fight.
Yeah.
You know what, we need to get together and we can make change, we can do this.
It makes you wonder why we continue to allow a group that has broken our laws in many occasions, has influenced our political class, and is still operating in a way as an enemy of a friendly nation. Why are we willing to risk that relationship to protect, let's say, an Islamic cult? Why are we allowing this? What is going on? What is the thought process? I don't have a good answer to that right now.
The Gulenists are, for sake of a better metaphor, the Scientologists of Turkey. They're really truly outliers who are trying to undermine the majority in Turkey.
Is our government working as an ostrich with their head in the sand and hoping everything will work out? Or are they really investigating some of this stuff and trying to find out, what is this guy all about? Is he a threat to the United States?
It's clear the network that was has been radically reduced since the 2016 coup attempt. But it's equally clear that in many countries around the world it remains, highly organized with considerable resources, protecting an extremely effective business structure. The influence of this Turkish cleric is still felt from the Pocono Hills to hundreds of countries around the globe. His opponents still accuse him of mass murder, trying to topple a government, and fraud and corruption. A battle not apparent at the peaceful compound at Chestnut Grove.